everyone, it's Jason from Game-Rave.com, and this is Game-Rave TV, Living Room Edition. As we head to episode 75, this week's show deals with a curious situation that involves game covers and the audience companies were trying to cater to. In the modern world, the closest crazy example we have of this situation was the BioShock Infinite debacle. Longtime fans of the game were horrified by how much the cover just didn't look like a BioShock game. There was no dark blue themes, no sign of the female protagonist, and truth be told, it really had all just been whittled down to some guy with a shotgun. The game's creator, Ken Levine, responded with one of the most to-the-point and honest replies of all time. Quote, "We went and did a tour, around to a bunch of frat houses and places like that. People who were gamers, not people who read IGN. And we said, so, have you guys heard of BioShock? Not a single one of them had heard of it. If I'm just some guy, some frat guy, I love games but don't pay attention to them. If I saw the cover of BioShock 1, what would I think? And I would think, this is a game about a robot and a little girl. Clearly, you don't want the wrong message to be conveyed by your game cover, as the wrong message can result in lost sales, confused consumers, and in the true modern social network era, a lot of unintended bad press and worse. To help disgruntled fans, alternate covers were produced and made downloadable. During the PlayStation's lifetime, however, downloading a 300 DPI high-resolution manual insert was just not possible with the internet speeds we had at the time. So a publisher would have to actually republish a game with a new artwork to try again. While expensive, if the gamble paid off, the profits and newfound popularity of the game would offset the costs. This episode's subset collection features games that had their covers redone to satisfy two completely different audiences. First up is probably the most tragic of the group, the original Wipeout. Psygnosis set their bar pretty high for the game's visual style and typography, bringing the neo-future Japanese influences home to America in a gorgeously crisp, shiny, high-resolution technical document-style cover. This, however, proved disastrous to casual players. Many people thought it was a Japanese game, or couldn't figure out that there was a hover car on the cover. Not kidding. Thankfully, realizing their message wasn't clear, they went back and created what is essentially the blandest, most textbook racing game cover invented. And it did the trick. With slipcovers for the original releases and an entirely new look for the future print runs, the game finally took off and sold well enough to become one of the earliest greatest hits releases for the system. This fear, however, kept with them through Wipeout XL, who also had one of the most blandest racing covers you've ever seen. Next up is Namco Museum 1 and 3. Now, hardcore gamers bought into this collection for the great selection of arcade games on the disc, while others appreciated the amazing and cheeky approach to the covers, which, once you had the full set, spelled out the company's name, Namco, on your shelf. As the collection was selling, Namco realized that 2 of the 5 games were selling a lot better than the others. It just so happened that these games had Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man on them respectively. 2 of the most mainstream arcade games ever, there was clearly something here that the general public wasn't seeing. Realizing that the creative N and M covers really didn't mean anything to a casual gamer, they re-released them with screenshots on the cover, as well as each respective yellow ball gracing the cover as well. Just like Wipeout, the now so obvious it hurts cover art catapulted the Pac-Man family back into the mainstream just like their original arcade heydays, leading both games, just like Wipeout, to the greatest hits status. Our next cover was actually just the opposite. It was redone to appease the hardcore fans. When Street Fighter Alpha 1 was released to homes during the PlayStation's early launch days, the American artwork was, how shall we say, less than pleasing. Whether it was Charlie's drug-addicted body, Chun-Li's anorexia, Ken's boner, or whatever the hell Rose was doing, it was just one giant slap to the fanbase's faces. When Capcom created the Fighter's Edge promotion, Street Fighter Alpha was blessedly restored to the original Japanese artwork, and it made all the difference. It was just too bad it was buried behind all the Fighter's Edge text. Next up is one that's fairly subtle, but still counts in appeasing the fanbase. Andretti Racing had its cover updated to represent the new sponsors he had. If you just thought, who would care about that, go ask any Madden fan what they thought when Brett Favre wasn't in his Jets uniform on the Madden cover. Our second to last example is one of the most serious of the group, with obvious reasons. Syphon Filter's 3 original cover, despite only being about in-game situations, rang too close to home with the events of September 11th. The game had already reached distribution warehouses, so Sony had to quickly recall them as fast as possible to get new covers done for them. Several copies did make it out into the real world, though, and are there for the taking. Bear in mind, though, while it's extremely rare, it's not worth the thousands of dollars some people are trying to stiff you out of it. At most, it's about $200 to $300 max. It's also important to note that this game is strictly a double CD 2-manual game in a double jewel case. Certain eBay sellers are trying to sell incomplete copies as single-release variants. Screw them. Don't fall for it. Oddly enough, our final cover switch concerns just such a situation, trying not to screw over people. When it was first released, Dragon Ball GT was part of an extremely small print run. The anime and manga revolution was nowhere near starting yet, and most anime games that were ported over had new artwork. This one just happened to have their real original characters. Bandai's original offering of GT was in such high demand that used copies were going for $100 or more in stores, and even more on eBay. I ended up paying about $150 for mine, and that was considered cheap at the time when I did it. The game was so scarce that one of the American magazines had a sweepstakes to win a copy. A used copy, because that's all they get their hands on. So when Infogrames/Atari came along and decided to release the game along with newly released Dragon Ball Ultimate 22, some changes had to be done. From a legal standpoint, the cover was changed just to update the publishing rights and logos, but truth be told, it was also more than likely to separate itself from the original release. This way, resellers couldn't buy the new version of the game and try and sell it off as the scarcer older copy. You actually see this all the time with toys like Transformers Generation 2 and so forth. And if there's one thing I love, it's pissing on those trying to exploit the gamers. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for this week. Hopefully you had a great holiday weekend. Hopefully I'll have a game room sometime in the next month and a half. It's been goofy lately, and it's just not worth going into. Take care, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you on the web. Take care.